A very warm welcome. You're watching RT International with me, Nikki Aaron. Well, first, the overnight breaking news from the Middle East. The United States has killed one of Iran's most senior generals. Qasem Soleimani led the Revolutionary Guard's elite Quds force and was assassinated in a drone strike in the Iraqi capital in an op sanctioned by Donald Trump. OK, joining us live, JAVED RANA, who's an expert on politics and geostrategic issues. Welcome to the programme. It's great to have you with us. Now, the US has openly says it assassinated an Iranian general. Is this a point of no return for the US and Iran?
Well, all the way President Donald Trump has been saying that he doesn't want any new wars. And I think today's assassination of Iranian general, that indicates that perhaps intentionally or unintentionally, maybe out of pure miscalculation, the United States today has done something which can possibly open a direct conflict with Iran, which is not going to bode well for the American interests in the Middle East and elsewhere in the Muslim world. Because to begin with, I think the Iranians may go for some sort of insurgent attacks. They have their proxies inside Iraq, they have their proxies in Syria, in Yemen, and elsewhere in the Middle East, in Pakistan. So I think the diplomatic missions in the Muslim world, they are going to be under threat as we speak. And that is just one small bit of what can possibly happen. And then the Strait of Hormuz can be potentially a theater of war in coming days and weeks. But it really depends at what scale the Iran wants to take this conflict, because this is the biggest loss to the Iranian government, something probably they were not expecting. And President Donald Trump thinks that he can restrict himself by airstrikes, by targeting Iranians' interest in Iraq and Syria, and Iran would not go to a tipping point where it can directly hit American interest. I think since the pattern has always been that Iran has been very meaningfully retaliating against American interest whenever its interests were attacked. So now we have to see the scale at which Iran can possibly go for. So we need to see that Israel is the biggest ally of the US in the Middle East, and I think there could be possibly attacks from the Lebanon's borders, from the Syrian borders against Israel. First, it was Israel who was conducting airstrikes on these Iranian militias inside Iraq, inside Syria. Now it is the Americans. So I think in one way or the other, Israel has successfully used American military shoulder to target Iranian in Iraq. But again, the situation in Iraq is very, very, very explosive. What USA has done, they have killed the top commander of the Iran, and then more importantly, the pro-militias commanders has also been assassinated. That is an indicator that now the relationship of the US government with the Iraqi government, they are going to be further jeopardized, because first 25 members of Iranian militias in Syria, they were also killed, and then the Americans try to take the Iraqi government.
Iran has long been fighting against ISIL. The general who's been killed headed the elite Iranian extraterritorial forces involved in that fight. So how will his death affect security in the region, do you think?
I think it is going to certainly affect the security in the region. ISIS, this dash is still there in the Middle East, and particularly in Iraq. And more importantly, I think now the confrontation of this conflict is going to be between Iran and the US, and it would certainly involve Israel. In sooner or later, you will see that happening, and I foresee insurgent attacks on US military bases in the Middle East, US diplomatic missions in the Middle East and elsewhere in the Muslim world. That is a most likely scenario, and I think there will be more pressure on the Iraqi government to ask American military soldiers, advisors, to leave Iraq, because it has become difficult for the Iraqi government to put up with this situation. Earlier on, there were protests against Iranians in Iraq, and now then there was a retaliation from the pro-Iranian militia. You may recall that at least there are 25,000 pro-Iranian militia inside Iraq. They can retaliate. They have the weapons. They have the trainings. And how Americans are going to handle this situation with 700, almost 700 members of its military force, that will be difficult. They are going to hugely focus on airstrikes if there is a bigger conflict. That airstrike means that there could be possibly more civilian casualties, which means more public resentment against Americans. And it will be very difficult for Americans now to stay in Iraq.
So what do you make of the Pentagon claims that the airstrike was a defensive action to defend American interests in the region?
Well, it is not defensive action. I see it is a more offensive action because the Americans see the things with a perspective which probably elsewhere in the world people don't see that. When Americans are killing, they're one of the top commanders, Iranian commanders, who was in charge of the entire insurgent operations in Syria, in Yemen, in Iraq. Obviously, this is going to have a retaliation from Iran, and there will be offensive action, if not directly, or certainly it is going to be indirectly from the government in Iran, because this has sent them as sort of a setback. And people in Iran, they are mourning, and obviously some sort of reaction is expected. How much time it will take, but it seems that this time around the action is going to be a bit different than we have previously seen. But certainly part of that retaliation could be the insurgent attacks through different proxies in the Middle East and elsewhere in the world.
JAVED Rana, politics and geostrategic expert, thank you for joining us on RT.